This is Jana Healy, and I'm going to hand over the floor to Maya, and she will help us with some questions we have about COVID and dealing with cystinosis, grief and loss.
Hi again, everybody. So we came up with a list of some questions specific to our topic that we thought you might find interesting. And I'm going to share the questions and then turn it back over to the group to give us their thoughts. So first, in thinking about all of your really powerful stories about grief and loss, I'm wondering what you learned from these experiences.
I can go first, I guess. I think I've learned not to take life for granted and not to take little moments for granted. I never know what the next moment's going to bring. So I try to be in the moment and enjoy the good moments when I have them.
Yeah, actually talking on that point, Steve, I totally agree. And something that I've learned from this experience is kind of the coping aspect to when something serious or adversity hits my life. I find that I'm better able to say, okay, so what needs to be done first, or I turn to how do I manage this? I feel like that's definitely something I was not able to do before. And now from this experience or these experiences, I've learned that to do that.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because as a social worker, as a professor, when I'm training my students, that's one of the things we talk about is really part of therapy is about building skills so that you learned a skill, and now the next time this experience or this feeling happens, you sort of have a set of strategies to use. That doesn't mean the feelings won't still be painful, but you kind of know how to tackle them. So that's a really nice realization.
Exactly, yeah.
And to build on that, when going through my VP shunt, that whole ordeal, what helped me and what I learned from that was the fact that, well, not a lot of people would listen all the way, so I learned to speak up and to do my own research and find out what works best for me.
You learned to be an advocate, even more than you already were.
Yeah. And from my experience, I learned that never take what your body is saying is for granted. Don't always trust the doctor, because sometimes the doctor doesn't know enough about your body or doesn't know enough about the rare side of things. So I learned that you have to keep on them and pushing them that, no, this doesn't feel right. No, we need to do this. No, we need to do that. Because I don't ever want to go through that again.
So our next question was, as you were going through this, who did you turn to for support? And was it sufficient, or would you handle it differently in the future?
My family, my doctors, friends, for different reasons. Doctors to figure out what's going on. Family and friends more for emotional support. The second part of the question was, how would you do it differently?
Yeah.
I don't think I would do it differently, honestly.
Well, it sounds like you've got a nice circle of folks that you feel you can lean on.
Yeah, for sure.
Anybody else?
This is Jana. I'll answer. For me, I leaned on family and doctors. Mainly my parents helped me through the VP shunt. I was fighting it the whole way. I did not want it done, period, because, well, the doctors kind of scared me into not wanting it. He said that's a last resort, and, he said, there has been people that have died from it, from the surgery, and I was just like, oh, I don't think I want that. But with the kidneys, with my kidney failing like it did, my dad kind of took me aside and said, sometimes you have to do what you have to do. For the first time, I heard him talk about the Vietnam War that he was in. He never talks about it. He said, sometimes you just have to do what you need to do to survive. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah,
Wow,
I
that's
guess
really
that makes
powerful.
sense.
Yeah.
And it kind of woke me up into, maybe I should just do it, get it over with. It needs to be done in order for me to survive. So, that really helped me out, along with, Sarah's support and the doctor's help with mainly medical stuff like medication and keeping me on track that way.
Anybody else want to add anything?
I think that my parents were actually the biggest support, because while I was recuperating from my transplant, I was able to turn to them and literally live with them in that time, because I could probably barely make soup like from a can. I'm not even sure. So I'm very, very grateful for their support in living with them. And my brother, who donated the transplant, was also with us. So I definitely leaned on them a lot. My brother and I had a few special kind of bonding moments, and he once told me that it's almost like he gave birth to me because he gave me second life, to which is sort of funny, but at the same time very sweet and endearing. I love him much. So don't know what I'd do without those guys and the other family members, my sisters, who both are my biggest cheerleader in different ways. So I mean, it's great to have family, but at the same time, I Zoomed, or maybe not Zoomed, but FaceTimed with my friends and got to share some good experience with them and some laughs to try and cheer me up because I wasn't going out. So great supports there. I don't think I'd do anything differently.
On that note, I think my big support system was my mom and dad. My dad was sort of the cheerleader. My mom was like the pit bull / lioness because of everything that went wrong. She just reamed right into him because I just wasn't feeling good enough or up to it to try and argue with my doctors or argue that this isn't right and, try and tell them what they needed to do for me. She just jumped right in and is like, no, you need to do this. And why are you giving her this medication? You need to give her this medication. And I was sleeping through most of it, but she was there. My brother John was there. Jana helped. And I mean, when I went home, my support system was Cass, and because we lived in Minnesota and our family lives in North Dakota. But yeah, my support system helped me get through a lot of it. And I think the only thing that I would change is being more forceful towards the doctor to just please listen to me.
I like the image of your mom as a pit bull. That's amazing. Everyone needs a pit bull.
She's had to deal with this our whole life. So she just, the second something went wrong, she just jumped on him.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so my next question for all of you is, during that time, or really at any time, have you utilized mental health treatment or therapy? Did you have any challenges handling sort of co-occurring personal issues and health issues? I know sometimes it's challenging to find clinicians who can handle both. So I'm wondering what your experience has been like.
Yeah, I've utilized counseling or therapy, talk therapy, and during my time of kidney failure and the loss I've kind of dealt with in losing my job. Co-occurring personal health issues would be the fact that I was having my kidney fail while I was working in an industry which is like mental health itself and working with individuals who have co-occurring mental health issues and substance abuse. It was stressful in the workplace and stressful in the home front, and I couldn't do both. It got to be too much. So I did make what I still believe was the healthy decision to leave my line of work and start looking for a part-time job or a full-time job in another area. But I became too sick. But I was, as I said, seeking counseling or therapy. And as I shared with my story, it was sort of focusing around that grief and loss of both my health and of losing my job and my savings. I didn't necessarily have anybody who understood cystinosis as a counselor, but at that time, she did a great job of kind of highlighting, compartmentalizing both areas and finding a counselor for myself. What I had to do in terms of the fact that I wasn't making money, I had left my job, was Google, essentially, sliding scale counselor. So I could find someone who kind of dealt with their payment from a sliding scale standpoint from what you make. So they wouldn't charge you a ridiculous amount of what typical counselors or therapists would cost. And so in that case, the cost was basically kind of negotiated at what I could afford. So I still paid. It was still a fair bit, but at the same time, it was manageable for my budget.
Does anybody else have experience with going to professional counselors?
Yeah, I've gone multiple times. The big time I went was during the last part of college. I kind of had a mental breakdown a little bit because there just like too much happened at once. I got pseudotumor cerebri, and I didn't freak out so much from that. I went on this new medicine, and the medicine really messed with me physically as well as kind of mentally. And I went from being a pretty physically fit person to just like within a couple days, just not being able to walk down the street. And I got a really bad roommate at the time too. I got a new roommate, was diagnosed with PTC, and went on this horrible medication all at the same time, and it was just too much at once. Yeah, so I went to a counselor, and I went to Eastern Michigan, and they actually offered a certain amount of free counseling for anybody. So I went to them for a week or two, and they gave me a lot of self-help things. And most of the time, what I found with counselors is they kind of remind me that I'm good at self-healing. I don't know if that's been other people's experience.
No, it definitely is though. Sometimes, there's folks who it's the first time you're in therapy, you've never done that before, but often it's like going back for a refresher course, like to have someone remind you, hey, you can do this. You've done this before. What are the skills that you have? And, to think about it again. So,
yeah.
And no one should ever feel like, oh, I did that and I should never have to go back. That problem should be fixed, because that's not how our health and mental health works.
Right.
And it's also, it ties together, reminds us so much of how health and mental health are just completely intertwined. They're not like two separate entities. And even though the cystinosis sometimes like maybe feels like it's its own box because it's people, they don't know about it, but the reality is no matter what's bringing someone into therapy, often there are sort of physical issues like the change to your body happening at the same time as the mental health stuff. And I think you all talked about physical experiences really that caused you to feel grief and loss, and then made you decide to maybe get treatment sometimes.
Yeah.
Sara and Jana, do you want to add anything?
Sara does. We'll have to take to it. I guess I went into therapy when I was in high school because a lot of the people in that high school weren't very accepting. They liked to spread rumors. They liked to poke fun at people for if they smelled or if they, if they didn't like the way they acted, or it was just too cliquey at our high school. And I got pretty depressed about, because I was always worried about my smell, and I was worried about, would I ever get a boyfriend, or would, people actually start hanging out with me and Jana, because we didn't have a lot of friends in high school because they just really didn't understand us. And when we would try and explain what was going on with us, they just acted ignorant and would spread rumors. So yeah, me and Jana, we hated high school. We liked college a lot better.
It's so interesting. Sometimes you just have to remind people. I always feel with like teenagers, you just have to remind them that if you can get through these couple of years so many times, right, it does get better, because you can form different kinds of friendships as an adult, and you can have more choice sometimes when you're in college or you're out in the world than you can when you're kind of stuck in, the social world of high school. But it's hard to know that at the time.
Yeah.
The high school bubble.
Yes, high school bubble.
I totally hear you. I definitely got picked on a lot. I had one friend that would always be like, "What are you staring at?" If they were like, someone was staring at me, or like something like was going on.
You had a pit bull.
Yeah.
So my next question is, Are there any therapeutic approaches other than, talk therapy and counseling that were helpful for you? And then we'll also talk about sort of some of the other coping mechanisms and self-care we use as well.
So yeah, this for me, I started to read several books by different Buddhist monks, for example, Thich Nhat Hanh. And I found these books on mindfulness to be very helpful during this period of going through sort of losing my job and kidney failure, to remind myself that it's literally today. What we have is today, and that's all we have. And what we can practice is compassion with self and then compassion around us with others. And that really spoke to me because I felt like I needed to have compassion for myself and stop being so angry with the situation of sort of what happened and what is, and just ground myself in the moment, because with cystinosis and many other illnesses like rare diseases, you don't know what tomorrow will bring. So you need to just live in the moment. So I definitely fell into sort of reading those books and that practice of mindfulness.
It's really powerful. It's a really powerful thought to sort of think about what it means to just, be focused in the now and accepting of the now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For me, artistic therapy is kind of puts me at ease more than talk therapy. I do acrylic or oil paintings. Sometimes if I feel like it, I'll look on YouTube and try to do a drawing. But that usually helps me, is just kind of being in my own little world with my music, with my speakers on, and just, getting it all out that way.
Yeah, I do the same kind of thing. I play guitar and sing songs, and sometimes I doodle. And if I'm having anxiety, it eases my anxiety. Playing guitar and singing also acts like a vent. Anything I'm feeling, if I have anger, frustration, sadness, I can just put it all out there in the music, and it's a catharsis.
That's how I feel too. I'm into singing, and my whole life I've always looked at, some people just listen to the songs and they like the rhythm or whatever, but I actually will look at the words, and I like a song based on how it makes me feel. If it makes me feel good, sad, happy, it helps me get through the tough times. Like if I'm feeling crappy and there's karaoke going on in a bar, then I drag Jana and Cass with me, and I'll be singing, and they'll be like, "Oh, we'll just be your support system." They won't come up and sing, but I won't drink or anything. I'll just drink water. It's just because it's like my release. Like, yeah. I can just let it all out.
Yeah.
Those are great examples. Do people have other sort of coping mechanisms or strategies that they learned? I mean, Steve, you're talking a little bit about sort of dealing with anxiety. There's some different kinds of techniques or even apps that are out there that are really geared to help with making you feel calmer or coping with anxiety or panic. Have you guys tried any of those?
Yeah, I have. I'm trying to think what it's called. It's got Worry Not on it, and
the Intella. Wait, it's on our list, which we're going to share with everyone later on. Where is it? IntelliCare.
Yeah.
We have like 6 or 7 or 10 different apps, I think.
Yeah, it's called the IntelliCare Hub.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I've got some of those. They're good. And then walking helps a lot too, especially like a really long walk by myself.
Yeah, being physical.
Yeah.
But also just being out, right? Being out in the world, being out in nature. I mean, that's one of the things, with what we're all dealing with now. The idea that can you still get out and walk around, even if you have to be far away from people, just being outside is so important.
Yeah.
Does anybody, I don't know if any of you are particularly religious or involved in a religious community, but is that something that's important for you?
I'd say I'm more spiritual than religious. My folks belong to a church, and they've been streaming stuff, and sometimes I'll go in and watch some of what their church is streaming. I believe in God, and but I don't always need like a community with me.
Right.
Sometimes I just like having the personal relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Going back to
Yeah.
sort of Steve's point of like being active, one thing I have used for probably 10, 15 years has been physical in terms of going to the gym and lifting, like lifting weights, and more recently over the last 4 or 5 years to climb, whether it's outdoors or indoors. For me personally, this allows me almost to feel like I don't have an illness, that I just have this energy and I'm just this healthy individual. And that's the one side of it. But the other side of it is that if when I'm feeling really anxious or upset or nervous or some kind of test that I'm waiting for is on my mind, I just go and I climb. And I get all of that pent up energy with like each move that I make on the wall. So that's been something that's really been helpful in terms of coping for me.
Well, sometimes they talk about ways to handle panic in terms of identifying like things you can see, things you can hear, things you can touch. So climbing, right, so much relies on those things. It kind of makes sense that you can't get caught up in your thoughts because you have to be thinking about, where do I put my hand on the wall? How am I doing this? So,
totally. Yeah. It's a super good distraction, and the community is just always there to help.
Yes.
And I think that's kind of what I lacked, like we were talking about with high school, is that belonging. And, I found that in the gym, and everyone's just so kind and helpful, and you just feel like you belong.
That's wonderful. Any other hobbies or rituals or things that are helpful when in your day-to-day or when you're feeling particularly sad or anxious?
I guess I already mentioned it, but talking to a good friend.
And we've got, some of us have pets in our lives, right?
Yeah, Jana just did a DNA test on her dog, so to see what he was.
It's important to know our dog's ancestry.
Yeah, he's a pretty mixed breed. He's got Australian Shepherd, German Shepherd, Siberian Husky, Malamute, and Chow Chow. And,
Wow.
And he's about 1% wolf.
So I was wrong. You don't need a pit bull, you need a wolf.
Yeah, right.
We worked really hard to get to that joke, people. Our next question is kind of a deep one, but as you were going through these experiences and after these experiences, do you feel there are ways to kind of get back to who you were before these things happened and before this experience of loss and trauma? Or do you feel like you've become someone different? And what have you held on to and what's changed?
I think it's a combination. I think to some extent I've kept some things about myself, but there's definitely some things I've had to let go of, and some things that don't apply to me anymore. I think it's taught me to be more adaptable than I used to be, just because the back and forth of healthy and then sick and healthy and sick. I guess it goes back to being in the moment again. I'm able to adapt to new situations pretty easily because of having been put in these situations where things are changing all the time. So you have to learn how to adapt and move on. Yeah, and I think I'm more empathetic with other people than I used to be, but especially other people with chronic illnesses, not necessarily just cystinosis. I always try to look at things from another person's point of view, which I think when I was a lot younger I didn't used to do. Yeah, what about you guys?
Yeah, those are some interesting points, especially about, being sick, then being okay, and being sick, and kind of going back and forth. I think for me personally, looking at the other side of kind of being healthy as opposed to going through kidney failure and dialysis and everything, the loss and grief, it's almost like I went through sort of all of that, and then afterwards realized that I was still struggling with something, but couldn't put my finger on it. And I think now looking back, it was just that I'd been in survival mode for so long.
Yeah.
that it was like I didn't know necessarily how to be who I was, and that's exactly what I was struggling with, is sort of figuring out who I am on the other side of all of that after coming through all of that. And I think there's no real answer, but for me, it was like, this is me before, and I can attest to what you said too, Steve, like empathy.
Yeah.
I'm more empathetic and definitely more resilient.
Yeah.
And I have a voice. I've learned somehow to have a voice and be louder, whether it's supporting myself through like career, because I've changed jobs many times, or my doctors, because going through all of that, you really learn who you are, and from a health perspective, what's going on and what you're feeling. So I think it's like kind of almost a difficult change, because you're not really sure who you are. You've been in survival mode. It's like, who is this healthy person, or even who am I, like when I'm sick, like who am I, like what am I doing? You're just surviving. But then the other side of that is you're more empathetic, or you're more resilient, and there's this new, stronger, maybe to some degree, side of you. So I definitely think you kind of get to a point where you're maybe not the same person, but you're maybe a well-shaped shiny penny, or at the end of it, shinier.
Yeah.
It's hard. Yeah, it's a hard answer.
There's a metamorphosis kind of process that happens while you're going through all that.
Yeah.
I think the things that have stayed the same for me are, I always
tend to be optimistic. So sometimes it can take me a minute to get there, but my default mode is always to be optimistic and hopeful. And I think that's partially like
a survival thing. Like, if I can't be optimistic, then what's the point of living?
Yes.
But that's a little warning chime, like, well, my optimism isn't there now. What's going on? Right? This must be something I need to work, I need to work on a little bit. It's like trying to pay attention to our own sort of signals.
Yeah.
Sarah always gets after me. I'm a pessimist most of the time. I call myself a realist, because whenever something is going wrong with Sarah or me, I'm always being realistic and what could happen next. I should call a doctor. I should do this. I should do that. Something could go wrong, and Sarah just gets after me. Just be hopeful.
Practice mindfulness.
Yeah. That's one thing I definitely need to work on. With everything we've been through, it's one of the hardest things to work on, is being optimistic with this disease. There's always something else waiting in the shadows of it.
Yes. So I've definitely had my dark moments, and what always helps me back from those moments is remembering that things always seem to get better. I always seem to get through the I get sick and then I get better. There's always a better. It might not always be the same as things were before whatever thing, but there's always a better, and it's something that always helps me. There's always a light after you get through the dark.
Yeah, I think the older I got, the more I always kept my optimism, but during the whole process of what happened with dialysis and all that stuff, that kind of broke me for a while. I didn't get out of bed a lot. I felt like crap all the time. Once you get through something like that, you feel more appreciative of the days where you feel great.
Oh man, yeah.
Because that's why I try and think on the positive side, because I know that sometimes it's not going to be great. You're going to feel like crap, and then you're going to feel like you're not good enough. But, there will always be a next day. It's just that day wasn't your day.
Right. That's a good way.
That kind of leads kind of nicely into our next question about sort of thinking about what are the messages you kind of give yourself, or the philosophy you carry to sort of help you get through when things are challenging.
I always try one thing that's been keeping me going is trying to be of service to others and serving a higher purpose, I guess. And I think trying to be there for other people makes me feel more useful and more positive. Like being there as a shoulder for someone else to lean on helps me feel stronger. If that
Yeah,
makes
it's
sense.
actually, it's something that we, as a clinician, like I recommend for people, like when you're feeling sort of down or isolated or alone, how can you find a way to, volunteer or, do something for someone else? Because it gets you out of your kind of your own little box and,
Yeah.
reconnected to the world, and now, of course, when we're all in our own little boxes, literally, thinking about how can we still, use connectedness online or, be available by phone or other things to do, because obviously amongst this group where everyone is being very careful about their, their immune system and their health, what kind of warriors can we be from, behind the safety of our computer screens? But, it's still that idea of getting out of ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you speak of volunteering, and that's something I did a lot. I was going through kidney failure because I couldn't work. I couldn't go to a job every day that relied on me. So I spoke a lot to the kidney community about the importance of like mental health, coping, and exercise with wherever you're at with your health, even just walking around the block. And I think that's part of what gave me my voice, because in high school, I always hid everything. Or when I was a kid, I never wanted to go to camps. I just didn't want to associate with my illness. And speaking about and being very vulnerable about my story to the kidney community, for the Kidney Foundation here, my local Kidney Foundation, and my Transplant Manitoba, I shared a lot about what I went through. I talked about my personal problems, my personal issues from like a kidney community standpoint, and it helped me gain my voice. So in terms of messaging like to myself, that's what helped me kind of grow a little bit. But one thing that I had to tell myself over and over again when I was going through kidney failure was basically sort of have patience, be kind to yourself, tomorrow's a new day. Like I always had to tell myself tomorrow's a new day, or write my good intentions book.
Yeah.
I say that in quotations, no one can see me, but my good intentions book, and it was 3 to 5 things of what I'm grateful for, and that's it. And that was the only thing I was allowed to write in there. And sometimes it was the same 3 things over and over again for a week, but it's what I needed to when I wasn't working and going through kidney failure. So
yeah, but that's really, what a great practice, and pretty simple to do, like a pen and a notebook or a Google Doc.
yeah, exactly.
Sarah or Jana, anything you want to share with us?
I guess something I always tell myself when I'm going through something that's bringing me down or because of my illness is, this is only temporary.
Yeah.
It's not going to last forever.
Yeah.
So, and there's always a way to fix it, so to speak.
Yeah.
Different ways to cope.
Yeah.
I guess the way I look at things, or my motto is, well, I'm really stubborn, so I refuse to be negative, although some days I feel like just giving up. Like, say I go to work in the kitchen and my feet just don't want to work with me, or something. I just keep telling myself it's just one bad day. Tomorrow's a new day. You can go home, you can vent to Jana and Cass, you can let it all out. It doesn't need to be bottled up and kept to yourself because you don't think other people will understand, sort of thing, which is what I did in high school. I bottled it up because I didn't think they would understand.
I mean, it really takes us full circle, right, about why we started doing this to begin with, about, not bottling things up and sharing what you're feeling and connecting with other people, and how important that is, as part of our mental health. It's not just about what we're feeling inside, but it's about, right, how we're connecting or able to connect to other people. Or if
Yeah.
we're feeling like we can't connect to other people, then that's almost a, that other little chime of like, hey, I need to find a way to get back to being in touch with others, whether it's friends or family or therapist or whatever, that, that isolation mentally is one of the hardest things.
Yeah.
Yeah.